Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Nour Elborno. I'm sorry I haven't been posting any videos in the writing series, but it's been Ramadan for almost 20 days, and it's really difficult to do anything in Ramadan other than, the kind of practices we do in Ramadan. But I thought this is important because so many of my students have been asking about this, especially novel students and literature students in general. The question is, how do we analyze a story? How do we analyze a novel? What do we look for when we're analyzing a story or a novel? Now, the entire concept of analysis is that it's like you want to understand the subtext that is included in the original text. So if you read a story or you start reading a novel, if you read it for fun, then you wouldn't be thinking too much about why this, why that, what does he mean here, what is the narrator's intention there, and that kind of things. But if you're reading for analytical reasons, if you're reading because it's part of a course, then how you read is different. You start asking yourself, why did he use this metaphor, for example? What is the purpose for saying this? Did he mean anything when he described the character in this particular way? And remember that throughout your analysis or reading, you're going to focus on the adjectives and the adverbs that are used, because these are the key words that provide a sense of imagery. And of course, you look at the metaphors, if there is hyperbole, if there is symbolism, if there is whatever it is that the text includes. And if, like, this is a thing that I've always learned as a student, and I would like to pass down to you. If it's there in the text, if something is in the text, it's there for a reason. If it's not in the text, it's not in the text for a reason. And by that, we mean when you read a description and you ask yourself, why did he use these exact words? Now, I don't want to sound extreme to the extent that why is the chair blue or why is the table green? But sometimes there are things that are connected throughout the story or the novel, hints that are being dropped here and there for you to notice. And that's what we're going to learn together in this video. So this is a very short story, and it is about a young boy whose name is Anansi. And sorry, so Anansi is the father, and we have Kukutsin, and he's the son, okay? So what we're going to do is that we're going to read it together. It's not very long. It's like only 1,284 words. We're going to read it together, and we're going to see how we connect ideas together. When you analyze, your job is to make connections, to draw patterns, to look for patterns, to see why a certain phrase has been repeated multiple times, to see why a certain character is more described than the other characters, to see why a certain character is given more screen time. And by screen time, I mean it speaks more than the other characters. And if there is a character that does not speak at all, why isn't that character speaking? What's the connection between the characters? How do the characters develop? Does a certain character change along the novel or the story, or does it stay the same? And if it does change, how does that change affect the main theme of the story, novel, or any literary work? And if that character remains flat, it doesn't change, then, well, by not changing, how does it affect the story? Now, what we're learning together this semester is The Lord of the Flies. And when you think about The Lord of the Flies, from the very beginning, you find Golding working, planning, orchestrating the characters in a way that leads them to the final stage of turning into we use the word savages a lot, but it turns them into hunters who have thirst for blood. And once you come to chapters 10, 11, and 12, you come to the realization that every description that has been given to you in the beginning of the novel reveals or foreshadows this major shift in their characters or in their future. So, what do we do when we read in general? We try to, and I always tell you, one reading is never enough. In the first reading, you're exposing yourself to possibilities. You come to conclusions, you make up your mind about these possibilities when you reach the end of the novel, and then you reread it again. Because as long, like throughout the process of reading, you make assumptions. You assume that this means this foreshadows that, this could refer to this could refer to that. And only by finishing the novel, you come to the realization to whether those assumptions that you made are right or wrong. Okay, so in the very beginning, you need to understand that one reading is not going to be enough. You're going to read it again and exclude all the assumptions that turned out to be false by the end. I'll give you an example. For instance, in the beginning of a certain story, I make the assumption that this character is going to die because it's been described as dark and it has blue color surrounding its lips. And then we notice, or at the end of the story, we realize that no, the character is still alive. So the assumption that I made based on the clues I thought were clues turned out to be wrong. Only through a second reading can I exclude this possibility. Okay, makes sense? Now, this short story begins as follows. Everyone was hungry, including Anansi and his family. His son, Ukutsin, walked through the forest looking for whatever he could find. His sharp eyes fell upon palm nuts. They were small, but they were something. He took a big stone and tried to crack one open, but oh, instead of splitting when he hit it, the nut went shooting off and fell down a great hole. Now, so far, like I said, I want you to look at the adjectives, to look at if there are any metaphors, any similes, because that's the kind of imagery that's going to give you clues and hints of what's going to happen next. So the first thing, you find a description. He has sharp eyes. Now, by describing Kuku as having sharp eyes, we get this understanding that this kid is smart. This kid is not manipulated easily. This kid sees clearly. He is not, his vision is not clouded by anything. So he sees, his vision is very clear. Fill upon palm nuts. They were small, but they were something. So it's like he accepts whatever he finds. He took a big stone and tried to crack one open. So from this, we understand that this child is not afraid of trying in order to get to what he wants, right? So he grabs a big stone and he tries to crack a nut. So by doing that, I understand more about this Kukutsin child. I understand that he's not afraid of trying. Instead of splitting when he hit it, the nut went shooting off and fell down a great hole. Now, when I stop here, I'm going to make two assumptions. One, he ignores it and looks for another one, or two, he jumps inside the hole. So as you read, you start building or making assumptions. Kukutsin examined the opening in the ground. The word examined also helps me understand that this child is not irrational. When I explained this to my intro to literature students, I told them that usually children, they're not rational. If their toy falls in a hole, they would jump without thinking about the consequences. So here we have Kuku, who fears of what's going to happen next. So here he examines the opening in the ground. It looked like it might belong to a fierce beast. The palms of of pounds of hunger were sharper than his fear, so he jumped down into it. Here we have two things. Remember when I said a writer does not add anything unless it's there for a reason, and it's usually an adjective. So here we have fierce and beast. I'm going to make the assumption that this foreshadows something evil under the ground. Why? Because why would he think it belongs to a fierce beast? It could be just a hole in the ground, right? Someone dug this hole and for whatever reason. So why did he say a fierce beast? So I make the assumption that this probably foreshadows that, well, there is a demon under the ground, or there is a beast under the ground. So he was hungrier than he was afraid. Okay. So what do I know about him? I know that he is fearless to a great extent. Whoa, it was big and it was deep. He landed at the bottom. A little bruised and a little shaken, he rose to his feet and adjusted his eyes. So from this line, I understand more about this child's character, that he's not the kind of kids who just cry, and if he's hurt, he starts making, like asking for grown-ups' help. Instead, he just rises and adjusts his eyes. So from this, I understand more about his character, that he's not only fearless, it's not only that he's careful, so examined, careful, sharper than his fear, fearless. He's also independent in that he rose after he had fallen. He had not been expecting this. The underground layer was lit by lanterns. In fact, it was not so much a layer as a town with streets and buildings, but it was empty, or almost. Now, the pose here makes me think something is going to happen. I'm making an assumption. It was empty, or almost. So why did he say or almost? So I understand that something is going to appear in that city, underground city. On he wandered, calling out to ask if anyone was there. Eventually, he came to an old woman sitting in the garden. "Hello, good woman," he said. "I come from the land above, where there is nothing to eat. Have you anything down here to fill an empty stomach?" Now, how he calls her a good woman indicates that he is polite. I'm making the assumption that he is polite. And he is politely also asking for food. The woman says, "Certainly, my boy. Just go into the garden around the back of the house and visit the yam patch. Listen carefully to what the yams say and ignore those that call out, 'Dig me up.' When you hear one that says, 'Don't dig me up,' do dig it up and bring it back to me." So what is a yam? A vegetable that looks a bit like a red-skinned potato and are sometimes called sweet potatoes. Now, Kukutsin was a well-mannered boy. In literature, there are two types of clues included: direct and indirect. Now, when the narrator says Kukutsin was a well-mannered boy, he clearly, explicitly, openly tells me that he is a well-mannered boy. But if you notice here, so this is direct clue, direct quotation, indication. Here it is indirect. I understand from the way he says, "Good woman," he's a well-mannered boy. Okay, the way he asks for food shows that he is a well-mannered boy. So here, this is an indirect clue, and this one is a direct clue, and we'll come to this later, inshallah. We'll mention a couple of examples. And he listened carefully and did exactly as he was told. Again, this is direct indication that he is obedient, right? So this is direct, that he's well-mannered, and this is direct, that he is obedient. I'm making assumptions. I want to remind you that I'm making assumptions. I'm building my argument throughout the reading of the story. He went into the garden where the yams were indeed very talkative. Most of them begged him to dig them up, and only one called out in a whiny voice, "Don't pick me up. I don't want to be picked up. I don't want it. Don't pick me up." And that was the one he picked up and brought back to the old lady. Now, here, do you think this is direct or indirect? It's indirect. Why is it indirect? Because we understand from this statement that he is an obedient boy, right? Because we are shown his actions. So from his actions, we conclude that, he's an obedient boy. But here we don't conclude, we don't make conclusions. Here we are told that he is obedient. So we call this one direct, and we call what we did here indirect. Now the woman says, "Peel the yam, throw away the inside, boil the skin in the pot, and give it to me." The boy thought that this was a very strange upside down sort of request, but he did as he was told. He gave the boiled yam skin to the woman, and she commanded, "Now I shall eat my meal. Do not look at me as I eat." "Yes, ma'am." "Yes, ma'am." Do you think this is direct or indirect, showing his obedience? Indirect, okay? Covering his eyes is also indirect way of informing us, because we make a conclusion here that this little boy is indeed obedient. Obedient, مطيع, okay? When she had finished her meal, she said, "Go back into the garden and choose a drum. But be sure not to take the one that says ding dong. Instead, make sure you choose a drum that says dong ding." Again, the boy did exactly as he was told and returned with a drum that said dong ding. The old lady said, "Take this drum home. Anytime you feel hungry, just beat it." The boy thanked the old lady. The boy thanking the old lady shows that he is a well-mannered boy, and hurried back to his village. He placed the gift in the middle of his hut with his hungry family gathered all around. Next, he beat the drum and all sorts of wonderful food appeared. Puputsen was keen to share his good fortune with the whole village. He called everyone to the meeting place and beat the drum once more. Enough food for a feast appeared by magic. The hungry people ate their fill, sang the praises of Puputsen. Now, what do we understand from here? That he is a generous boy, sharing his good fortune with everyone. It shows that he is generous. Everyone rejoiced except for one. So now, from this, before we continue reading the line, we know that someone is going to be the antagonist, someone who's going to be the opposite character of Kuku. Who is that? It was Anansi, who was jealous of his son's instant popularity. So the first thing we learn about Anansi, the first description of Anansi, is that he is jealous. Is this direct or indirect? Obviously, it's direct. If I had a drum like that, I could be rich. So while Kuku wanted to bring food to the people and to his family, Anansi wants to be rich. What does that tell us about him? Maybe that he's greedy, okay? And every day he badgered his son to tell him how he found it. Eventually, Kukutsen was worn down by his persistent father, and he told him that the story of the old lady who lived below the ground. He showed him the hole that he had fallen into, and Anansi jumped into it. Now we start making comparisons between what we read earlier and now. Earlier, we saw that the little kid examined the hole. Did Anansi examine the hole? No. So what does this tell us about him? That he's impulsive, that he's not careful. Just as his son had done before him, he wandered around calling out, "Is anyone here?" until he came upon an old woman sitting in a garden. Most unlike his son, he spoke rudely to her. So this is a clear, direct indication about his character, that he is rude. So far, we understand that we have two different characters that are completely opposing to each other. We have the well-mannered boy who is polite, who addresses the woman nicely, who's obedient. And now we have the rude father. What does he say? "What are you waiting for? I haven't got all day. Get me some food." and make again comparison between what the father says and what the child says. The child says, where is it? Okay, so he says, I come from the land above where there is nothing to eat. Have you anything down here to fill an empty stomach? But the other guy, the father says, give me some food. So why is it important to compare between like characters? It helps us understand the theme or the story more. So basically, before we come to the end of the story, we realize or we make an assumption that this man's ending is probably not going to be good. And if you remember the fierce beast, it looks like something bad, something fierce is going to happen to the old man. So the old lady took no offense. We noticed that the old lady's character is flat. She doesn't change. She was nice to Kukutsin, and again, she's nice to Nancy. And why? Remember at the beginning, I told you if a character develops, we ask ourselves why, and if it stays the same, we ask ourselves why. Now, why does the character of the old woman stay the same? Because she's not centric to the story. She's a tool to explain to us readers that if you're bad and greedy and horrible, bad things are going to happen to you. But if you're good and nice and well-mannered, good things are going to happen to you. Just go into the garden behind the house and visit the yam patch. Listen carefully. So what she does here, I don't want to make the video very long. She gives him the exact instructions she gave to his son. Of course, we notice that don't take me for a fool. I see right through your tricks, you old witch. So here we see that he's impolite to the woman. If a yam warns me not to pick it up and I just root it up, regardlessly, something nasty is going to happen to me. So we feel that he does not trust people easily. So he's distrustful. And since that was his line of thought, he went to the yam patch and seized one of the yams that were crying out to be taken. Now, what he did here is exactly the opposite of what the woman told him. So is he obedient or is he disobedient? So he's disobedient. Does the narrator tell you that he is disobedient? No, I made that conclusion. So this is indirect. And he ignored the one that said, don't take me. He brought it back to the old lady and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Again, what foolery, declared Anansi, and he did the opposite of what he was told. Doing the opposite of what he was told, this is direct. Direct indication that he is what? He is disobedient. Okay. Now you're talking, this is after he gets the drum. He returns to the village. He ran back to his village and called everyone to the meeting place as his son had done before. He beat the drum, blah, blah, blah. This time, no feast appeared, no food, not even a few crumbs. Instead, wild animals came out of the woods, likes of which the villagers had never seen before, had just pulled them into the world. There came lions, crocodiles, rhino, all colors of snakes, blah, 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 and scary, dangerous, fierce-looking animals. I'm interested in the word fierce. You would notice that it appeared earlier. As for Anansi, he climbed a tall tree to escape the beasts, and from there, see, fierce and beasts. Good. Okay, now what we did is called analysis, and by now we have come to the conclusion that okay, we came to that conclusion earlier. We said that the theme here is if you do good, you get good. If you do bad, you get bad. Now, I want to talk about the development of characters. I want to describe the characters. If you want to explain what the characters are like, you're going to need to support your argument with textual evidence. Do you have a claim? Yes. My claim is the story includes two main characters, the father, Anansi, and the son, Kuku. Unlike Anansi, Kuku is obedient, well-mannered, and polite. Okay? Now, in this paragraph, in which I'm analyzing the characters, I'm going to explain what well-mannered means. I'm going to explain what polite means. And then I'm going to support my argument. This is called an argument. So I'm going to support my argument with direct and indirect indications, which we call textual evidence. Do you have textual evidence? Yes, you do. Because see all the things we highlighted, these are called textual evidence. Now, before I wrap up, before I conclude, I just want to point out one thing. So in the story, there has been mentioning of magic and the things alike. I just want to highlight that these things are not accepted in Islam, and there's no such thing as good magic versus bad magic. It's all bad magic. But this short story is like it clearly, it's short and it clearly shows the development of characters. So forgive me for having chosen the story, and I hadn't noticed that line in the end. But anyway, I think this gives you an idea of what it means to analyze a text. I hope this helps you with other texts, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. ولا تنسونا من صالح الدعاء.